Good afternoon. I'm going to try to get through this fairly quickly because first, once I'm done here, at 12:30 in this room, you will hear from the foreign ministers of France and of Saudi Arabia, and that will concern the international conference on the implementation of the two-state solution. And so that will be right after I'm done here. And then at 1 a.m., you'll hear about food insecurity from Maximo Torero, the chief economist of the Food and Agriculture Organization, who will brief you by video conference. So those are happening right after. Do you have something? Okay, thank you. And let me get through the news of the day first then. All right. First off, the Secretary General will speak this afternoon at the opening session of the International Conference on the implementation of the two-state solution. He will say that the only realistic, just, and sustainable solution for Israelis and Palestinians is two states, Israel and Palestine, living side by side in peace and security within recognized borders on the basis of the pre-1967 lines, with Jerusalem as the capital of both. But he will warn that time is running out, with trust slipping every passing day, while institutions are weakened and hopes are dashed. At an earlier meeting this morning, he said that the wholesale destruction of Gaza is intolerable and must stop, and that unilateral actions that would forever undermine the two-state solution are unacceptable. The Secretary General said that today's conference is a rare and indispensable opportunity. We must ensure that it does not become another exercise in well-meaning rhetoric, Mr. Guterres added. It can and must serve as a decisive turning point, one that catalyzes irreversible progress towards ending the occupation and realizing our shared aspiration for a viable two-state solution. Tom Fletcher, the emergency relief coordinator, yesterday welcomed Israel's decision to support a one-week scale-up of aid, including lifting customs barriers on food, medicine, and fuel from Egypt and the reported designation of secure routes for UN humanitarian convoys. Some movement restrictions appear to have been eased on Sunday, he said, with initial reports indicating that over 100 truckloads were collected. This is progress, Mr. Fletcher said, but vast amounts of aid are needed to stave off famine and a catastrophic health crisis. He said that we need sustained action and fast, including quicker clearances for convoys going to the crossing and dispatching into Gaza, multiple trips per day to the crossing so we and our partners can pick up the cargo, safe routes that avoid crowded areas, and no more attacks on people gathering for food. UN agencies and our partners have welcomed these measures. Yesterday, the World Food Programme said that it has enough food in the region, or on the way there, to feed the starving population for about 3 months. The UN Relief and Works Agency says that some 6,000 trucks in Jordan and Egypt are waiting for the green light to enter. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization tells us that July was the worst month of deaths linked to malnutrition, with more than 85% of malnutrition-related deaths recorded in 2025. Nearly 1 in 5 children under 5 in Gaza City is now acutely malnourished. Our partners tell us that in July, more than 5,000 children under 5 have already been admitted for outpatient treatment of malnutrition. The only 4 specialized treatment centers in Gaza are overwhelmed, pushing an already fragile health system closer to collapse. The UN and our partners stress the need for unimpeded access of humanitarian aid through all crossings and corridors to allow large-scale delivery of aid to the starving and exhausted population. Yesterday, the Israeli authorities announced simplified movement procedures, both from the crossings and within Gaza. Out of 17 missions requiring coordination with the Israeli authorities, 8 were facilitated, including the collection of fuel and supplies from Kerem Shalom, while 3 have been denied and 2 canceled. 4 missions, including the uplift of food cargo, were impeded, but accomplished. The long-standing restrictions on the entry of aid have created an unpredictable environment with a lack of confidence by communities that aid will reach them. This has resulted in many of our convoys being offloaded directly by starving, desperate people. Yesterday, hungry people offloaded food supplies before they could reach their intended destination. As we have said before, the only way to mitigate for the situation is by having a sustained flow of aid over a period of time. This was evident during the ceasefire when such incidents did not occur. Meanwhile, airdrops have resumed in Gaza yesterday. While we welcome all efforts to provide aid to the people who desperately need it, UN agencies and partners remind us airdrops are the last resort measure and carry risks for people on the ground, Injuries were reported yesterday when packages fell on tents. Meanwhile, OCHA reports that modest quantities of fuel have entered Gaza last week. Fuel must be allowed in, consistently and at the volume needed to keep aid operations running, including operating the trucks to collect and distribute cargo. This morning, the Secretary General delivered remarks via a pre-recorded video message to the Food Systems Summit in Addis Ababa. He said, "We have seen progress since the first summit 4 years ago, but progress is not fast or fair enough. Global hunger is rising," he said. 1/3 of the world's people cannot afford a healthy diet, while 1/3 of the world's food is lost or wasted. The Secretary General highlighted 3 urgent priorities. First, he said, we need integrated policies and a global framework that connects agriculture to people, their health, climate, trade, and finance. Second, we must address power imbalances, govern food systems fairly, tackle inequality, and deliver on the right to food for all. And finally, Mr. Guterres said we must unlock and connect finances at scale. But above all, he concluded, we need peace so that investments can take root and farmers can look to the future with confidence. And the Deputy Secretary General is in Addis Ababa, attending the second UN Food System Security stock-taking moment on behalf of the Secretary General. At the opening press conference, Ms. Mohammed highlighted the importance of the summit in sharing progress on food systems transformation, strengthening multi-stakeholder collaboration, unlocking financing and investment, and building momentum towards 2030 and beyond. In the margins of the summit, the Deputy Secretary General met with senior government officials, civil society representatives, youth, and other key stakeholders to discuss priority actions to advance food systems transformation and accelerate progress on the Sustainable Development Goals. This morning, Security Council members held an open meeting on Syria. Geir Peterson, our special envoy for Syria, briefed by video conference from Geneva. Among other issues, he spoke about the violence that we witnessed in Sudan this past month. He underscored that a sovereign Syria must ultimately hold a monopoly on the legitimate use of force and operate under the rule of law. For her part, OCHA's Director for Operations and Advocacy, Edda Musornu, highlighted 3 key asks for the Council's attention. First, protection of civilians. Second is continued investment in the humanitarian operations in Syria. And lastly, mobilizing resources for Syria's reconstruction and development. And our colleagues at the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs say that a 3rd convoy made its way to Sudan Governorate today. This assistance, including from the UN, continues to be provided through the Syrian Arab Red Crescent Society, but sustained access for more assistance is needed. Meanwhile, over the past 3 days, OCHA led 2 interagency missions to assess the situation of families displaced by recent violence in rural Damascus and Daraa governorates. In the town of Sayyidah Zainab in rural Damascus, some 3,000 people are sheltering in hotels. Displaced families reported trauma, injuries during fighting, and loss of homes and documentation. Health access is limited, with only 1 public hospital functioning and the nearest health center 6 kilometers away. In Daraa, the mission assessed the Tal Shahab Reception Center in Isra district as a potential site to accommodate displaced families. The World Health Organization has confirmed 5 attacks on healthcare in Sudan Governorate during the recent escalation of violence, including the killing of 2 doctors, obstruction and targeting of ambulances. WHO-supported mobile medical teams have been deployed to areas of displacement, providing urgent outpatient consultations, maternal and child health services, mental health support, and essential medicines. We and our humanitarian partners have scaled up support across Daraa and rural Damascus governorates. The UN Refugee Agency and its partners provided more than 1,800 kits of household items, reaching over 9,000 people. UNFPA and its partners continue to deliver psychosocial services and distribute dignity kits to displaced women and girls. Our partners have also delivered 90,000 bottles of water, provided 12,000 liters of fuel to operate essential water, sanitation, and hygiene facilities, and supplied dozens of plastic water tanks to displaced families in Daraa and Sueda governorates. Additional water tanks are being dispatched to reception centers across the affected areas to enhance access to safe water. Peacekeepers from the UN Interim Force in Lebanon report continued Israeli Defense Force presence and military activities in the mission's area of operations, including an air attack by a drone on Saturday in Sector West. Yesterday, the peacekeepers found 2 unauthorized ammunition and weapons caches in Sector East, containing mortar and rocket shells, rocket launchers, and unexploded ordnance. These were referred to the Lebanese armed forces. Meanwhile, incidents of unfriendly behavior and obstructions to UNIFIL's movement continue. On Saturday, a UNIFIL patrol was blocked by local individuals from accessing a public location in Sector West. The patrol was able to continue its movement following an intervention by the Lebanese armed forces. Separately, on Friday, a quadcopter drone hovered above a UNIFIL patrol for several minutes in Sector West before returning south of the Blue Line. We reiterate the critical importance of the mission's unhindered freedom of movement. Any intimidation and obstruction of UNIFIL's work must stop. Turning to Ukraine, our colleagues in the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tell us that attacks over the weekend continued to damage hospitals, home, and critical infrastructure across the country. According to authorities, at least 20 people were killed and more than 120 others were injured across the country from Friday to the early hours of today. The most severe impact occurred in the northeast in the Sumy region, where attacks hit a civilian bus and disrupted electricity services across the region. In neighboring Kharkiv region, a hospital was struck last Friday, according to the World Health Organization. Attacks and hostilities also caused civilian casualties and damaged residential buildings, schools, and shops in the regions of Dnipro, Donetsk, Kherson, Mykolaiv, and Zaporizhia. Meanwhile, aid workers continue to coordinate with local organizations to support the most vulnerable people in the Sumy region. Today, the humanitarian coordinator for Ukraine, Matthias Schmale, visited several border communities with Andrea De Domenico, the head of OCHA's office in the country, and Richard Ragan, country director for the World Food Program, to assess the most urgent needs of people affected by intense hostilities. Following the strikes in the regions of Kharkiv and Dnipro, aid workers delivered shelter materials and other supplies, assisted with repairs, and provided psychosocial assistance to impacted families. So far in 2025, more than 30 convoys have reached nearly 40,000 people in frontline areas. Turning to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, our peacekeeping mission there condemns the attack that took place over the weekend in Ituri province. According to official reports, at least 49 civilians were killed by members of the ADF armed group. Most of them were reportedly killed inside a place of worship. Several people were abducted. Homes and shops were also set on fire, worsening an already extremely concerning humanitarian situation in the province. The mission expresses its deep outrage at these heinous acts of violence, which constitute serious violations of international humanitarian law and infringements on human rights. In coordination with local authorities, our peacekeeping colleagues have provided support for the response, including the organization of burials and the provision of medical care for the wounded. At the same time, MONUSCO has intensified its security efforts in and around the site of the attack by increasing the frequency of patrols in the area. The mission remains fully committed to working alongside the Congolese authorities and local communities to help prevent future attacks, protect civilians, reduce tensions, and contribute to the stabilization of areas affected by armed violence. Turning to Sudan, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs is alarmed by escalating health and food crises across the country. In the locality of Tawala in North Darfur State, cholera cases continue to rise, with more than 1,500 suspected and confirmed infections reported since June. Over 500 people are currently receiving treatment. Local authorities have introduced emergency measures, including market closures and a ban on public gatherings. As we mentioned here last week, humanitarian organizations urgently require $120 million to scale up life-saving support in Tawila over the next 3 months. This funding is essential to contain the outbreak and sustain critical services. Meanwhile, food insecurity continues to worsen across Sudan. In North Darfur State, low cereal supply, poor harvests, and a prolonged food deficit have severely affected food availability. In Abu Shuk camp, displaced families are facing acute shortages of food and medicine, with local sources reporting 4 hunger-related deaths last week. Food prices continue to rise to alarming levels in El Fasher, the state capital. In May, the average cost of the local food basket there was more than 6 times the national average. The city recorded the highest prices for nearly all essential items among assessed localities. Some of the most staggering price hikes included sugar, which rose by some 960%, sorghum by 160%, and even liquid dish soap increased by 150% in just 1 month. As you'll recall, the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, or IPC, has identified famine conditions in multiple areas in North Darfur and the eastern Nuba Mountains, with more locations at risk. An IPC alert earlier this month noted that the food security and nutrition situation will further deteriorate over the lean season from July to October, particularly in areas of active conflict with limited access and experiencing high levels of displacement. Despite these challenges, we and our partners continue to provide assistance. Last week, the UN and our partners distributed shelter materials, blankets, cooking sets, and hygiene items to 2,000 newly displaced families in North Darfur State. However, nearly 60% of displaced families still lack adequate shelter support. And last, today is World Hepatitis Day. It's observed to raise awareness of viral hepatitis, which is an inflammation of the liver that causes severe liver disease and liver cancer. And this year's theme is, let's break it down. That's all I have. Are there any questions for me before you go to the people who you really want to talk to? Yes. Yes, Edie.
Thank you, Farhan. Just a couple of clarifications. Have the Israelis opened any other borders except for Kerem Shalom? I know that the Egyptians are getting some things in from the south.
I believe, besides Kerem Shalom, that they have been also using the Zikim crossing. So we've had those. We're trying to see whether other crossings that have been used in the past, like Rafah, will be used now.
And follow up to that, is it correct that every truck that went into Gaza yesterday from the UN was basically unloaded by desperately hungry Palestinians?
Yes, I believe that the emergency relief coordinator, Tom Fletcher, said that as far as we know, the vast majority of our supplies were basically removed by desperate people yesterday. And what he's been saying and what we've been saying for some time is that we expect that to continue until there's enough traffic and enough regular traffic that people don't feel desperate and don't think that the next amount of food will be their last. Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Oh, wait, hold on. Wait for the light to turn on.
Tom
Yeah,
Bailey,
there you go.
BBC, thank you. Can you just give us some clarity on, because what the Israelis have been saying more recently is after they partially lifted the complete blockade of food after the 3-month period from early March into May, what they've more recently been sort of implying is that there was open access to the United Nations, but it was the UN's issue that it wasn't moving anything within Gaza. Can you just help us understand what the restrictions were being placed on the UN during that period in terms of access to Gaza?
Yeah, I've said this for this audience many times, but I'll repeat it in capsule form for you, that there's a fairly lengthy process where we basically have to inform the Israeli authorities before we get to the checkpoints of the goods that are being distributed. We get to a checkpoint area. They examined the goods there. It goes in to Gaza. At that point, it's offloaded and then reloaded onto other trucks, is inspected again, and then we have to get clearances to move forward out into the areas where they can be distributed. If those procedures are time-consuming, sometimes that puts the aid at risk because the window for the safe delivery of aid, aid that we can imagine can actually get to the areas without being looted, starts to close. Yes, Pam.
Could you tell us how the airdrops are working? Jordan had some, UAE had some, and a few other NGOs. They drop, and is there any distribution after the drop, or is it just dropped?
We are not participating in the airdrops that have been happening. Obviously, we welcome any efforts to provide more aid, including airdrops. But it is a last resort measure. You can't possibly get more aid in through airdrops than you can through road convoys. And yesterday we were aware that injuries were reported when some of the packages fell on tents. Deshi?
Couple of follow-ups. First, on Edie's question, when you're saying that starving civilians, they removed those humanitarian aid, do you mean looting?
Yeah, I mean, you can I don't tell you what words you can use for your coverage. Some people would call this looting. My comrade Stefan Dujarric, as you know, has referred to this as self-distribution. A lot of this is basically what we see it is as a desperation measure. So that basically we characterize it as the offloading of food by hungry people.
You know, the Israeli Authority always accusing UN and UN's humanitarian aid has been, taken by Hamas. If that is the case, you will have another good chance that those humanitarian aid delivery has been ended up in Hamas.
We are visibly able to see that people who are taking the food, we have to use open trucks by Israeli regulations, and we see the people who are coming, and they are very clearly desperate and hungry people. Regarding the allegations, we've been very clear that we have safeguards in place to prevent looting from Hamas. I think you've seen in recent days a number of news agencies themselves have looked into this and found the evidence scant, to say the least.
So, you just mentioned that Israeli Authority simplified the progress of passing through the border crossing and inside Gaza. Can you elaborate a little bit what has been simplified?
They have been basically allowing for the trucks for the clearances to come through a little bit more quickly. And so we've been able to get some more trucks in. It's still not what we want in terms of the large number of trucks we believe is necessary. 100 trucks, while good in a day, is about a fifth of what we want to see happening in our regular scale.
Do you have any numbers of those humanitarian aids that's still waiting for picking up in the border crossings?
Yeah. At the start of the briefing, what I said is that that our UNRWA colleagues say that there's some 6,000 trucks in Jordan and Egypt that are still waiting for the green line.
No, I mean
to enter.
inside Karim Shalom, how many humanitarian aids?
That's a very fluid system. I mean, there are trucks in Karim Shalom, then that are on the Israeli side. Then they go in to the Gazan side. Then they wait there, and then they have another set of trucks bring them in. So it's hard to get the numbers for all of that, but. Like I said, we'd had roughly 100 trucks go through yesterday, and we want to increase that number. Linda.
Thank you, Farhan. I'm just following up on Deshi's question about, possible looting of some of the food, which, the UN, as you've mentioned, carefully watches who's taking it. But I was wondering, does the UN have a sense of where Hamas gets its food deliveries from?
I'm not aware. You're as aware as I am of the reports of Hamas tunnels and activities like that. Those are not things for which we have any sort of investigative mandate. But we are certain that we've put in safeguards in place for the distribution of our aid, and our aid deliveries are reliable. Yes, Yvonne.
Sorry, Farhan, just asking for clarification. You may have said this at the beginning. So how, if you compare it to last week's situation, how much more aid is being let in through UN mechanisms this week after the opening of some of the crossings?
Well, we've only had one day of this so far, so we'll have to see whether this improves. But there was a small uptake from what we'd been having, which was a few dozen trucks going in for these days. As it is, and I think I've said this earlier during this briefing, we need a substantial amount of aid. At this stage, it's still not so much that the population themselves do not feel desperate, but we have the ability to get enough aid in so that there will be no efforts to offload trucks right away. Yesterday, WFP made very clear that there's enough food that's already in the region or on its way in that could feed people for the entire population for the next 3 months. now we just need to be able to get it in, and we'll rely on cooperation and see what we can do
So
about that.
you're talking about a very small uptick, you said. So doesn't sound like much has changed today.
We're hopeful that things will change. I mean, we've only really been under this new system for about a day or so, and we're going to expedite this, but we are trusting that we'll get the sufficient cooperation, and we want this to continue for as long as we possibly can. Yes.
Thank you, Farhan. Just a follow-up. You said that the WFP issued a statement that there is enough food for 90 days. May I ask, how did they got this amount of food came in? Did it just come in a single day?
No. We've been bringing it in to neighboring countries for some time and positioning it. So there's a lot of food that's what we call pre-positioned for distribution, but it needs to get in, and it needs to get to people who need it.
Most likely it is on Egypt side or Jordan or Cyprus, where the
it's
three
in different
hubs.
areas. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So the food is not in, actually.
It's not in. I mean, that, as we've been saying for months, has been the trick, is getting it actually in. Not just getting it into Gaza, but getting it into distribution sites where people can get to it safely. Yes, please.
Hi, Eitan Art. Over the weekend, there was reports that IDF admitted to destroying and burying contents of over 1,000 aid trucks because a lot of the aid was expired. Do you have any estimates about how much food and aid was expired over these 2 months from just food waiting around or aid waiting around?
I don't have any precise figure about this. We've been trying to get food in before it expires, so hopefully there hasn't been that much spoilage, but we'll check and see what we can determine about the expiration of food. Yes, please.
Thanks so much, Farhan. I'm wondering if you have any comments on Thailand-Cambodia peace agreement.
Yeah, we actually expect a statement on this. It's not ready yet. But we certainly welcome the ceasefire agreement between Cambodia and Thailand, and we see it as a positive step towards ending current hostilities and easing tensions. And we would like this agreement that's been reported today to be fully respected, and for the long-standing issues to be addressed. Yes, Mike.
Thanks, Farhan. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation sent a letter to Tom Fletcher, I think sometime in the last 24, 48 hours, trying to open up a dialogue with OCHA, with the UN at large. Obviously, the U.S. backs the GHF. The U.S. can exert some pressure on Israel to open up humanitarian corridors and the like. Is there any impetus here for Undersecretary General Fletcher or the UN as a whole to be in contact with the GHF, even to open up some sort of dialogue, even if they disagree with the methods being implemented by the GHF? Is there any communication between the two entities at this point?
I think Mr. Fletcher has indicated our willingness to talk to anyone who is trying to help provide aid to Gaza, and that includes the GHF. Obviously, we have the standards that we have outlined in terms of our principles for aid delivery, but within that context, we'll see whether we can get improved distribution of aid, and we're willing to talk this over with anyone on this.
So if you say that the UN is willing to talk it over with any entity that's able to help, but there's been no conversation, is the inference there that the GHF can't help?
I actually don't think it's the case that there have been no conversations. I believe that we've spoken at some level with GHF people under the aegis of seeing what can be done. But I don't think that there's any sort of agreements between us and them, given the nature of their operations and our particular standards for humanitarian aid delivery. Yes.
Thank you, Farhan. Quite different subject. President Trump said today he's very disappointed in Putin and set a new deadline of 10 or 12 days for Russia to stop the war, not 50. he's ready to impose strong sanctions on Russia and buyers of its exports unless progress is made. What about the Secretary General? Would like to hear clear support for these concrete peace efforts.
We welcome all efforts to achieve a peace between Ukraine and the Russian Federation that is in line with the UN Charter, with international law, and with the resolutions of the General Assembly and the Security Council. And with that, I wish you a good afternoon, and sit tight, and in a few seconds, you're going to have the next guest.